French energy companies operating in Russia's Arctic Sea, Italian luxury boutiques near Red Square, and German auto factories in southern Russia are just a few examples. As the United States and the European Union impose sanctions on Russia for its invasion of Ukraine, European businesses are bracing for the possibility that the sanctions imposed on Moscow will damage them as well. The sanctions, which include preventing the Russian government and banks from borrowing on global financial markets, halting technology imports, and freezing the assets of powerful Russians, were designed to cause the most damage to the Russian economy while causing the least harm to the European Union. But thousands of foreign companies that are doing business with Russia for years are bracing for an economic backlash, and the war in Ukraine threatens to disrupt supply chains and drag Europe's economy down just as it was beginning to recover from the COVID lockdowns. The European Union is Russia's largest trading partner, accounting for 37% of Russia's global trade in 2020. Much of the trade between EU and Russia is for energy. About 70% of Russian gas exports to EU and half of Russian oil exports go to Europe. And while sales to Russia represent just around 5% of Europe's total trade with the world, for decades Russia has been a key destination for European companies in a range of industries, including finance, agriculture and food, energy, automotive, aerospace, and luxury goods. Some European companies, especially in Germany, have had business ties to Russia from centuries. One of them are Deutsche Bank and Siemens, the massive conglomerate that is the parent company of Siemens Energy, have been doing business there since the late 19th century. During the Cold War, economic ties were seen as a way to maintain relations across the Iron Curtain. After the fall of the Soviet Union, Western companies came to Russia for different reasons, whether to sell Renaults or Volkswagens to the country's growing urban middle class, or to cater to a growing cadre of wealthy elites seeking Italian and French luxuries. Others wanted to sell German tractors to Russian farmers, or to acquire Russian titanium for airplanes. While some multinationals, such as Deutsche Bank, drew down their dealings in Russia after its annexation of Crimea in a 2014 military operation, others have worked assiduously to grow their market share in recent years and have been boldly angling to expand their Russian business. The chiefs of UniCredit Bank, the Pirelli Tire Company, the state-owned utility Enel, and others listened for over half an hour as Mr. Putin talked up Italian business investments and opportunities in Russia. The call, held Jan 25, riled European politicians and underscored the conflicting economic interests facing Europe as it now moves to punish Moscow with a barrage of sanctions for attacking Ukraine. A similar call set for next week with German business leaders, including those from the energy company Uniper and the supermarket chain Metro, was called off only on Thursday. But with huge economic assets at stake, European Union leaders have sought to walk a fine line in recent days over the scope of the sanctions, which fell short of the more sweeping economic clampdown that some supporters of Ukraine have demanded. At one point during frenzied negotiations this week, Italy's representatives sought to have goods produced by its luxury industry excluded from any sanctions package. They also argued for narrower sanctions that omit major crackdowns on Russian banks, as did Austria, whose Raiffeisen Bank International maintains hundreds of branches in Russia, diplomats said. More notable is the omission of sanctions that would harm Russian energy imports to Europe, in which a phalanx of influential energy companies from Paris to Berlin hold major interests. Nor did allies shut Russia's economy from the global payment system known as SWIFT, which is used by banks in 200 countries, drawing condemnation from critics who said Europe's leaders were putting economic interests above the human toll on Ukraine. That is a comfort for European countries whose companies have huge corporate presence in Russia. For France alone, 35 of the 40 biggest French companies listed on the country's CAC 40 stock exchange have significant Russian investments, from Auchan supermarkets on the streets of Moscow to the liquefied natural gas operations of the French energy giant Total Energies in the Amel Peninsula above the Arctic Circle. All but 2 of the 40 companies listed on the DAX index in Frankfurt have investments in Russia. Around 700 French subsidiaries operate in Russia in a variety of industries, employing over 200,000 workers, according to the French Finance Ministry. While Mr. Le Maire pledged that the impact to the French economy from sanctions would be minimal, the hit to some French companies was far from clear. Among the most exposed is the French automaker Renault, which has 2 factories in Russia and is the leading auto producer there through a partnership with Avtovaz, which makes the Lada the most popular car in Russia. Russia is Renault's second largest market after France. Last week, Luca de Meo, the company's chief executive, warned that worsening of tensions between Russia and Ukraine could lead to another supply chain crisis for the company. That problem has already hit Volkswagen, which said Friday that it would suspend operations for several days next week at 2 factories in eastern Germany that make electric vehicles because deliveries of crucial parts from western Ukraine have been interrupted by fighting. Volkswagen could also be hurt by sanctions against Russia, where since 2009 it has had a factory in Kaluga that employs about 4,000 people producing its Tiguan and Polo models, as well as the Audi Q8 and Q9 and the Skoda Rapid. Mercedes-Benz has a factory outside of Moscow, while BMW works with a local partner. All three have invested in the Russian market and a growing cadre of consumers that can afford its cars. This week, however, as Russia strafed Ukrainian cities and world leaders moved to impose sanctions, Volkswagen said the impact to its business in Russia would be continuously determined by a crisis team. BMW said, "Politics sets out the rules within which we operate as a company, and that if the framework conditions change, we will evaluate them and decide how to deal with them." And then there are the banks. Austria's Raiffeisen Bank, Italy's UniCredit, and Societe Generale of France are among the banks that have substantial ties to Russia. Italian and French banks had outstanding claims of around $25 billion in Russia at the end of last year, according to Bank of International Settlements data. France, Italy, and Germany were the main European powers pressing not to cut Russia off from the SWIFT global payment system. Cutting Russia out would make it hard for European creditors to receive money owed from Russian sources or to pay for Russian gas, which those countries have come to rely on, especially in Europe's current energy crunch. Despite the efforts to minimize the pain to their own countries, European officials acknowledge the situation would probably get worse before it improves. It will not be possible to prevent sectors of the German economy from being affected. The German economy minister, Robert Habeck, said, "The price of making peace possible, or to return to the diplomatic table," he said, "is that we at least make the economic sanctions bite." What do you all think about this? Tell in comments. Make sure you like and subscribe for more.